At issue tonight, Canada's apology after the resignation of the Speaker of the House for inviting and honoring a Ukrainian vet who fought in a Nazi unit. The Prime Minister tried to clean up the mess.
On behalf of all of us in this House, I would like to present unreserved apologies for what took place on Friday.
But the Conservatives want to keep the heat on Justin Trudeau himself.
Whether you blame him or the Liberal Speaker for recognizing a Nazi on the floor of the House of Commons, we all agree that it took him 5 days while he hid under a rock.
So is the apology enough to blunt any political damage? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it all down. Chantal Hebert, Coyne and Althia Raj. I will say it was 5 days from when this event took place on Friday. It was not 5 days from when we discovered that this had happened and when the Speaker eventually resigned. It took about 3 days for the Prime Minister to get to that point. But Chantal, what did you make of what the Prime Minister had to say, the way he did it, and whether it was the appropriate thing to do?
So first, just a word about the Conservatives. They are actually veering into where the NDP and the Bloc Québécois were at the time of the apology. Two, I'm totally okay with the Prime Minister not showing up for 2 days while the House sorts itself out about its Speaker. Yeah. It is the business of MPs to do that. But I think I expected that those 2 days would have been used to reach out to President Zelensky or to reach out to the Jewish community in this country or to veterans. And I'm a bit surprised that none of this happened. I am not saying Justin Trudeau is responsible for this mess, but I am saying that he is responsible for cleaning it up on behalf of Canada.
From what I understand, there's been some reach out, at least between Melanie Joly and Ukrainian counterparts. And yeah, go ahead, Chantal.
Yeah, okay. But you and I, we get these readouts when Justin Trudeau speaks to anyone who is a government leader, including President Zelensky. Maybe I messed up and you didn't, but I did not get a readout of a conversation between the Prime Minister and President Zelensky.
You didn't, and I checked again today, and it hasn't happened. Doesn't mean it won't, but so far it hasn't happened. Andrew, what did you make of the apology? And then we'll get to the Conservatives and their response.
Yeah, I agree with Chantal. It was maybe a little tardy. The Prime Minister had a chance to get out in front of this, and I think partly because he was trying to avoid the trap that the opposition was laying for him of it being his personal responsibility, which we can get into. I think he was a little too cautious, therefore, in regards to actually showing some leadership on this. We can get into the parsing, should he have apologized just on the part of the Government of Canada or of parliamentarians, but the point is there needed to be some symbolic offering in addition to the Speaker's on behalf of Parliament of Canada, Government of Canada, Canada as a whole, and he's the person that needs to do that. So a day late and a dollar short, but the right thing to do.
And it needed to be done in the House too, Althea, so that it would be on the record and sort of part of history.
Yes, and I'm going to make a bit of a nerdy point. I don't think it should have been done during question period, though. I mean, there's a period of time where ministers can make statements, and you would have expected an apology of this stature to be made in a time and space where he had the time to fully apologize. I agree with everything Chantal has said about you would have expected the Prime Minister to reach out to the President, to reach out to the members of the Jewish community, leaders, and to veterans, which are all points actually that the Bloc Québécois has been making all week. Frankly, the Bloc Québécois has been acting like the and the NDP as well. I think they've really rose this week to the occasion. But I also would have expected members of Parliament writ large, all of them, to apologize in their own name. Like, I wasn't in the House on Friday, but I would have expected that if I had gotten up and saluted a man that I later discover fought with the Nazis, I would want to apologize for my behavior, and I'm surprised that we did not see an outpouring. A few people have, Mr. Blanchet being one of them, but that's something I feel like really lacking this week.
Can we talk a little bit about the Conservative response? Chantal, you alluded to the way it has shifted a tiny bit today, suggesting that it's either the Liberal Speaker, and we know that a Speaker is not a partisan when they're in their role, or the Prime Minister who is responsible. But they are dragging it in front of committee. That started today. They didn't have the Speaker on their witness list. There is, I think, an ongoing effort to make it political, and I wonder what you think about that.
And I think that it's failing The fact that Canada screwed up is accepted, I think, universally. But the notion that it was the Prime Minister that should have been vetting the guests in the House of Commons, I let you imagine, and maybe I say this because I'm sensitive to the Quebec sovereigntist issue, but are we saying that a Liberal or a Conservative government would be in charge of accepting who the Bloc Québécois or even the NDP invites in the gallery? Mm-hmm. Parliament belongs to MPs. It does not belong to the Prime Minister. And the notion that the government can veto who you invite makes no sense. That doesn't mean there's no vetting. There is vetting done by the protocol office. But at the end of the day, if the speaker wants to invite someone, it is not up to the PMO to say, you can't do that.
So are the Conservatives, Andrew, hoping that Canadians don't understand this distinction? And is there a danger in making that argument again and again?
Well, we're long past the stage of trying to repair the damage done by the mistake, and we're now into trying to inflict maximum damage on the Prime Minister. Yeah. That's part of the process to some extent. There is, accounting to be made. There are questions to be answered, not necessarily by him, but we certainly need to get to the bottom of how this happened and make sure it doesn't happen again. It would be one thing if the Speaker were the Prime Minister's subordinate. We don't want leaders to be able to hide behind their subordinates and blame them. And for example, I think the Speaker it was probably one of his staff that screwed up on this in terms of the vetting, but he didn't blame the staff. He properly took responsibility. But the Speaker is not the subordinate of the Prime Minister. And so to speak as if he was, as if the Prime Minister should wear this when it's very clear that the PMO was not involved in this. I mean, the argument seems to be that they should be or should have been. And I think for all the reasons that we're stating, that's not necessarily the case. I will say, however, it's a bit precious, not for anybody on this panel, but for people in the opposition to be suddenly, and in the government for that matter, I should say the government, of being suddenly extraordinarily concerned with the rights and prerogatives of Parliament. Among the long list of powers and privileges and prerogatives that have been lost to Parliament and trampled over by government, who gets on the Speaker's guest list ranks pretty low.
Well, maybe it's a new opening for you to make all these arguments, Andrew. We could look at it in a positive light.
Or for Parliament to do so.
Yes, exactly. Althia, what do you make of the tack the Conservatives have taken and whether they've altered it slightly, as Chantal points out?
Slightly, but they're still trying to suggest that the RCMP should have played a role, that the public safety minister is ultimately responsible, and therefore the Prime Minister is ultimately responsible. I mean, I feel like we're speaking to two different audiences. There is an audience that wants to believe what they choose to believe, and the facts are not related to this. And this is not unique to this current situation. In the spring, when we had the whole China stuff, Pierre Poilievre was talking about Justin Trudeau being in the pocket of Beijing. I mean, there are a lot of things to legitimately criticize what happened in the spring, but that is an accusation that, was never shown to be accurate. And I feel like we're just adding more misinformation upon misinformation and selectively saying things like, well, the Prime Minister should be responsible for the itinerary. Well, if the itinerary is vetted by the Prime Minister's office or protocol or PCO, it doesn't mean that these individuals are approving who the Speaker invites and allows to sit in the Speaker's gallery. These are two completely different things, and I think it's lost on most people, and people will choose to believe whatever facts they believe are actually facts from whoever they believe has most authority in sending out that message.
I should say a little bit of opposition overstatement, I will say, is part of the process. That's how they get attention. That's how they make their point. The rest of us can call them out on it.
Yes, exactly.
But a little bit of exaggeration is part of the process.
I would like people to stay within the lane of factual things.
Okay. Last word to Chantal. Yeah.
And that's basically where we are. If the official opposition wants to overstate its case, all official oppositions have played this game. If it wants to ignore facts, there is no reason why people like us should be sitting around saying, great game.
That's right.
You're scoring points on the Prime Minister. Because if we do that, we're going to become the people who cover Donald Trump in the U.S.
That's right.
And say, well, it works, so it's great. And I don't think I want to live in that universe.
Okay. Good conversation. We're going to take a little break right here. And when we come back, we'll take a look at how the last couple of weeks really have affected, if they have, Canada's international reputation.
India needs to work with Canada to ensure that we get the full facts of this matter.
Whether it be dealing with Ukraine or dealing with India, how is this affecting this country's reputation? That's next. It's been a challenging couple of weeks for Canada diplomatically. A visit from Ukraine's president overshadowed in the House of Commons, and retaliation from India's government after the Prime Minister connected it to the murder of a Canadian.
I think it's extremely important that all of us continue to engage constructively and seriously with the government of India.
How has Canada's reputation on the international stage been affected, and what might it mean on foreign policy files? Okay, everybody's back. Chantal, Andrew, and Althia. Andrew, why don't you start us off on this? I think there was an initial reaction about the allegations Justin Trudeau made against India, which was that, we talked about it. This is potentially really damaging. This might isolate Canada. I wonder whether you think that has changed as people have started to learn maybe a little bit more, and whether the past 10 days or so have been cause for concern for Canada's role.
Yeah, I think it's less that it's affected our reputation than perhaps revealed it. I don't want to overstate this. I think various countries had various reasons for wanting to soft pedal to some extent on India. It did emerge that we had backing in terms of international, other countries' intelligence, but at the same time, people were certainly very cautious in picking their words in terms of supporting us. But what we've seen with both India and China in recent times is that they're willing to bully us and push us around. And when you're in that kind of world, you need allies. Well, as somebody said the other day, we're in a hard power moment, which isn't exactly to Canada's advantage. And perhaps it should be. I guess we're in a time when we're learning that soft power is very much related to your hard power. Unless you're prepared to pony up and put boots in the ground and be a reliable ally in ways that are difficult and costly, then people, when the chips are down, are not going to necessarily be riding to your aid and willing to speak up for you when you really need them. So we've acquired, I think, a well-earned reputation as a bit of a freeloader, not just on defense spending, but on things like peacekeeping, on things like foreign aid. We've relied on our own sort of self-image as everybody's good guy, that the whole world loves Canada. And what we're finding is, no, you have to kind of earn that support, and it's not just from being nice and high-minded. It's from hard decisions and devoting resources to things that we haven't been willing to devote resources to.
Though Canada's put up $9.5 billion to Ukraine. I mean, obviously there are things that we can't do because we don't have them, but that's not chump change either.
No,
yeah.
But we have that infamous moment when the Prime Minister said we're never going to meet our 2% target on the of GDP on defense spending for NATO.
Chantal.
Well, I suspect that any middle power that would be caught in a fight with India, China, and Russia, no matter the height of its contribution to NATO or whatever, would find that it's got the size to take on that battle. And you can say that we got where we are on China and India and Russia for a number of good reasons. And we didn't look for those fights necessarily. But the fact is that it's a field of rules. This is a government that came into power wanting to open more to China. Then it turned to India for a substitute. And then there's the Russia issue. I think the greatest concern should be that no matter what we do, we need to know, and we will soon enough, how the American election turns out.
Right.
Because at this point, Joe Biden's administration has had Canada's back on China, and it has had Canada's back on India. What happens if the next administration is Donald Trump's administration?
Althia, you want to pick up there?
I was going to use a word I'm not sure I'm allowed to say on television.
So don't.
We are in a bad place, Chantal. That's what would happen. I was actually surprised this week and last how vocal the Americans have been with regards to our brewing battle or this incident with India. It actually made me think, why are they doing this? Why is this to their benefit, to the United States' benefit, to back Canada in this fight with India? There's, I think, much more to this than we know of at the moment. And the UK has also vocalized support for Canada. I think it's been a bad week, bad 2 weeks internationally, because when Canada goes public with allegations of the seriousness, you want to be seen as somebody who's credible, who's responsible, who's mature. And then this incident in Parliament last Friday really harms your ability to make that case that the information that you're putting forward is valid and should be taken as credible. So I'm very happy I'm not Justin Trudeau most days, all days, but I'm especially happy I'm not Justin Trudeau past 2 weeks.
But Andrew, these are, like, as Chantal points out, these are things that have happened to us, right? Not things we've chosen. And if there was a different foreign policy, more foreign policy, would that have in any way affected what we're seeing?
I wouldn't overstate the degree to which these are happened to us. We've had some responsibility. We were very slow. The government was very slow in dealing with Chinese interference. We're now getting some information that we were rather slow to deal with Indian interference.
Okay.
So we have some responsibility. But I agree with you. It's a big, bad world with very assertive dictatorships or authoritarian countries that are not shy of throwing their weight around. And to pick up on Chantal's point, if we cannot be sure of the Americans, who've always been our big brother and basically, frankly, paid for most of our defense, if we can't be sure of their support and encouragement in years to come, then it's much broader than just these present controversies. We have to be rock solid with our alliances, and we have to think about how we're going to form solid alliances with countries that will come to our aid diplomatically and otherwise when we really need them. And I think this overarching point that we have to be more reliable allies ourselves is very, very germane. It's highlighted to some extent by these incidents, but it's much broader than that.
Chantal wants in, yep.
But at the end of the day, our biggest relationship is with the US. And nothing is going to change that. So what happens, and I'm not talking about Justin Trudeau here, or a Pierre Poilievre government. How, because I don't think a Pierre Poilievre government would be more open to India, more open to China, and would resolve or would join Russia against Ukraine.
No.
So how going forward are we going to manage this if our main partner becomes what we fear it might become?
20, 30 seconds, Althia.
Well, I think to Chantal's question, much like we managed it last time he was in the presidency.
This isn't last time.
Triage.
No, it's not. But I think the Prime Minister's office, along, frankly, with members from all different parties and premiers, managed that relationship as well as could have been expected. I agree it's not last time. Things have escalated. Yeah. But, what other choice do they have?
The hunt for a new Speaker of the House is on. MPs will vote next week. But how difficult has this position become, and what challenges will the new Speaker of the House face when it comes to presiding over the House of Commons? All right, here to break it down, Chantal, Andrew, and Althia. We don't have to go into the details of all the candidates that want this job, because it is a good job, a well-paid job. But I do want to talk about how important that job is, or how difficult that job is in our current climate. Althia, I think you might have thoughts on that.
It's a very difficult job to be in the chair and to be the arbitrator, the referee of question period. I think that is the most difficult part of the job. This year especially, MPs have raised, we say this every year, but they've really raised the bar in bad behavior. And, one incident in particular around Christmas time, Raquel Dancho, who is a Conservative MP, called a Liberal MP a liar, and she refused to apologize. And the Speaker, Anthony Rota, he expelled her for the House for a day, and she held a press conference saying the Speaker had expelled her for saying the truth. And the Conservative Party sent out a fundraising note, and they raised $1 million from that fundraising note. And then Anthony Rota started thinking that there were more MPs misbehaving because they all wanted to get thrown out and they wanted this to happen again. So just like that's a little incident kind of to paint the picture of the tone in the chamber. A lot of MPs, especially Liberals, Bloc, and New Democrats, would like it if the Conservatives stopped heckling, which are, I think, not really supposed to be doing. But I don't see a Speaker really shutting that down. The rest of the job of the Speaker is you're the administrator of the House of Commons. You're in charge of security, you're in charge of HR, the library, you're the boss.
Yeah.
But the hard part will be gaining the confidence of a House with MPs who have all different interests. And you have the chance to direct things. You can decide whether or not certain motions get voted on, whether some things are legitimate requests from opposition or they're just, or they're not.
Yeah.
So you can understand why the government would want to have one of its own members in the chair. With 3 Liberals at least running, it's going to be a lot harder than the last election, let's say.
Yeah, there is like sort of a playbook of precedence in terms of how the speaker behaves. But Chantal Althia is right, that it's an awful lot of power that you wield in terms of shaping the debate and controlling behavior.
And controlling behavior is going to be the difficult issue over the next maybe a year and a half that is left to this parliament. Why? Because it will become, as other parliaments in the past, increasingly toxic as we get closer to an election. And everyone has a dog in this battle, which makes for pretty messy spectacles. This week, the Conservatives were actually asking questions of the Bloc to attack the Bloc. You can see how the dynamics is kind of special. I don't know who will become Speaker next week, but I have seen speakers who were besieged by MPs and lost control of the House totally, and looked more like a hostage than a president than a speaker. So I'm curious to see. I'm thinking here of John Bosley, who was Speaker for the first few years of Brian Mulroney's tenure. Only me and Mr. Plamondon, the Dean of the House of Commons, remembers that. It was really bad. It was terrible. The poor man just couldn't catch a break.
I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
Oh, no, he resigned and we started having speakers who are elected and not appointed.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to see who they will pick and how that person is going to manage this.
I mean, that's a job I wouldn't want. Like I can moderate the 3 of you, but that's about it. Andrew.
Well, I'm less interested in how he or she will referee between the parties than how the new speaker, if they choose to do so, will represent Parliament and the rights of Parliament versus the executive, versus the government, and of MPs versus the party leaders and the party whips. I was struck by a note posted by Anthony Housefather the other day, an unusually thoughtful MP, Liberal MP, who said one of the things they'd be looking for in the speaker is will they change the rules in terms of who gets recognized in question period? Could we move to the British system where it's the speaker who decides who gets to answer questions rather than who's on the lists maintained by the party whips?
Yeah.
And if you look at the British Parliament, the speaker is the one who decides whether debate has gone on long enough rather than it being cut off at the whim of the Prime Minister. It's the speaker who decides whether to break up omnibus bills rather than allowing governments to package them all together and basically ram them all through Parliament. We've all been talking this last week about the sacred rights and prerogatives of Parliament when it comes to, who gets on the Speaker's guest list. There's an opportunity in this change for Parliament, if it were to choose to do so, to start to assert itself. But of course, they're themselves the product of the system, and they've internalized their own basically weakness that I doubt that they will take that opportunity.
Chantal, you want 10 seconds, yeah.
It's too late in this Parliament for something like this to happen.
Oh, no, I was going to say, if they want to do that, Elizabeth May is running, and Elizabeth May would do that.
Well, that would change all of our jobs. That would be wild. Thank you all for that good conversation. Appreciate it. And that is that issue for this week. You can catch The National on YouTube and, of course, CBC Gem. I'm Rosemary Barton. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you back here next week, if not before.